Hello and welcome back to episode 4 of the dev series for my game, Crisis Arcana. In this episode I will be going over the introduction of random level design to my game, as well as how I plan for my game world to be split up. Now I had never dabbled with procedural generation before, so the outcome's quite basic at the moment, but it definitely in my eyes the results are promising for what my game will become. Firstly, I went to Unity and created a new scene. This will be where I plan to test and experiment with my first random level. I opened up the scene and added a grid tile map to it. These are what I use to hold all the background assets. Next, I started working on a script which would manipulate the tile map and populate it using random assets, or to be more accurate, specific assets, but allocating them randomly. I informed the script that we would be using tile maps, and then I created some arrays which would store all the tiles, and some variables which would store the tile maps which I wished to manipulate. I added a for loop inside of the start function which will be called as soon as the script starts up. Each run of a loop will choose a position one greater from the last, and then it will allocate a tile randomly selected from my arrays and place it in that position. It's very basic as of this stage because I just wanted to see how easy it would be to actually randomly add tiles to the tile map. I then went back into my random scene and then created an empty game object which would then hold the script which would run all of this random program. I then assigned the tiles to the script so it knew which tiles to place on the tile map. I ran the program a few times and found that yes, it created a line made up of a random assortment of tiles. Every time I ran it, it was a different order, just as I wanted. With the game now randomly producing a line of tiles, I decided to increase this by, making it produce tiles vertically, so that a box of randomly tiles was produced and not just a line. I achieved this by placing yet another for loop inside the previous for loop. This for loop did exactly the same thing as the other, but just placed the tiles vertically. I tested it out and now the game was producing areas of random tiles instead of just lines. So I next just imported the player in, as well as increased the area for which the tiles to be randomly produced. This was to see if I could actually have my player explore a random area. Now at the moment the walls textured in the background aren't interactable with, but that's because I was just using them as placeholders to see if I could get this to work, which I did. My game utilises multiple tile maps so that I can place assets on top of other assets. The tile maps are the base ground for decorations on the ground, decoration 2 for certain circumstances like painting the chalk writings on top of carpets, and the walls which the player has to navigate around. For each of these tile maps I would need to create a function to randomise the assets on each of the tile maps, thus adding truly random looking levels. I started off by making the function for randomly placing the walls. Now, I couldn't just copy and paste the previous code, but change the tile map and assets that were placed. Had I done this, then a wall would have been placed in every single tile, thus meaning the player would not have been able to move anywhere. To fix this, I quickly added in a little check that would randomly choose a number between 1 and a number I could determine. For each tile, if the number landed on 1, then a wall would be placed in that tile. This would allow for walls to appear randomly placed throughout the map. I went back to Unity to test it out and found that the walls were only placed along one line, which obviously is not what I wanted. A quick check of my scripts made me realise that during the for loop, their vertical position never actually changed. This was a very simple fix to carry out, so I applied it and then went back to Unity to try it out, and lo and behold, I now got random walls generated all across the map. However, the first time I did it, I got locked in completely, so I tried again. And then next time when it randomly generated, I had a bit more of an area to work out with. Thanks to my code, it's not actually too difficult to reduce the amount of walls. All I need to do is make it so it has to choose a number between 1 and something higher than what it already was. I then added in the code which would randomly place the decorations such as chalk writings and carpets, as well as the texture for the crystal ball. Each of these functions are similar to the walls in that they are not placed in every single tile and thus have to randomly choose a number and make it equal 1 for the texture to be placed. Next, I added in enemies spawning into the level, as well as included the ability for the enemies to actually navigate around the environment and the walls which are randomly placed. I achieved this by having the script quickly analyse the surroundings and scan it for where all the physical obstacles were, which is what the enemies have to walk around. I finished it off by quickly creating some basic underworld and hellish assets to use instead of all the placeholders I had been using so far. Instead of walls, I used lava as well, which the player would have to navigate around. I plan to code in at some point so if two lavas spawn next to each other they would join up to be a different texture so it looks less a bit bossy, if you know what I mean. Like they're just kind of dotted everywhere and we don't connect up and it just looks a bit off to me. On the subject of worlds however, how I actually want the game to work is you'll be able to go and explore these random worlds. I'm going to say 5 or 6 of them. Each world will have a different theme and obviously different enemies to fight. The player's goal will be to navigate each of these worlds and slowly make their way down the world's levels. So they'll start on the top level and then they'll have to find the exit randomly placed within that level to go down to the next one. There is the time limit which the player has to beat or else they'll be instantly teleported out of the level. The time limit can be upgraded and time pickups will be scattered throughout the level, thus to make the player's journey easier. For each world, if the player makes it down enough levels, then they will encounter a boss, and defeating the boss will award the player some sort of token, and then if the player collects all the tokens, then they will be able to fight the final end boss. Now I know it's not the most complex story or scope, but I believe it's perfectly reasonable for me and my skill set at the moment to achieve. I'm happy with the progress I've made so far and look forward to actually start making assets and incorporating these new worlds. Obviously I'm going to carry on making these devlogs and I'm also enjoying having fun making these as well, and I think my editing skills are actually getting a little bit better, so that's a good thing as well. As per usual, I hope you've enjoyed the video and I hope you continue to come back to see my further development of Crisis Arcana. If you have any feedback then please comment it down, I would love to hear it, and if you have any tips or tricks or stuff you want to see, I would love to hear that as well. Thank you all so much for watching and I hope to see you all next time. See you later.